Your sound is a big deal.
Hate the sound of your voice? Well, it's time to change that.
It really is kind of a clue to people if they don't like the sound of their voice to look at, well, what is the disconnect between who I really am and what I'm projecting?
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, the Starseed Collective's Vanessa Lambert is tuning us into our unique frequency.
Really go inside, really go internal and ask the question of like what you're called towards.
Helping us hack our energy.
And working with mantra all alone by itself is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do.
And ultimately find our way through the spiritual overwhelm.
There's a lot going on. Sometimes at the end of the day, it's like, you know what you need to do for your soul to feel good. But it's just like, God, the only thing I can do that's spiritual right now is take a bath.
I mean, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is Netflix and chill. Let's be honest.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now.
Hi, Vanessa. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I am so excited to see where our conversation goes today, what Spirit wants us to talk about, and open up maybe some Akashic Records and get some good juicy energy going. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's so amazing to be with you. I'm like so into your energy already. I'm like, let's go.
Thank you. I know, I have a really big smile on my face, and like I said, you're kind of getting me out of a commitment for a little bit of time, so I'm like, this is what I love to do. I love these deep dive conversations. I'm so not the small talk person, although my husband will say I'm like the weather person ever since moving from Southern California to the South. Like, I'm always on the weather. I'm like, ooh, there's a storm coming, there's this coming, but like, so I actually do talk about weather quite a bit, but it's so not my jam. It's like, I love these deep dives.
I'm into it. I'm here for, the weather all the way to wherever else we go.
We're going to blow with the wind, kind of like we need to do in our life when we are trying to live a more consciously led life, when we're trying to pull in that energy of spirit. I think we miss some of that sometimes in our humanness of the structure. And I think that is something that you like to teach and help us with, is find that flow and kind of like blow with the wind a bit if we're going to bring some parallels to the weather. So how do we tap into the flow of like where our life is going?
Oh my gosh. We'll start with a small subject.
Of course.
Love. Yeah, we're starting light.
Very light.
I think ultimately, like at the end of the day, it's really about tuning your energy, and whatever tools you have that help you tune your energy and really kind of optimize your frequency are the tools that you should use. And for me, those tools are Kundalini yoga. I work in the Akashic Records. I'm really into, conscious travel and really getting out in the world and kind of mixing into beautiful locations. But I think it's more about you finding that blueprint for yourself, and I think if there's anything I've learned in 30 plus years of teaching and coaching is that there's no one size fits all. And certainly, there are common denominators, you could say, in practices that I've seen work for a lot of people. But I think that, whenever you outsource the how do you get into flow question to somebody else, like, you've already stepped outside of yourself. So my answer would be really go inside, really go internal and ask the question of like what you're called towards.
I love that because there's so many things out there. There's so many coaches out there. There's so many people saying, you need to do this. You have to have this routine. You have to have this morning meditation. And I honestly think, what you might find in your life now works for your flow might work differently in 5 years, in 6 years. And so, like it's kind of like we also have to bring that flow and that energetic release to just like any spiritual, any wellness practice we have in our life, because our lives are constantly evolving and changing. And I love like how you're like, go within and stop like looking outside of ourselves, because so often it's like we're looking for that magic pill or we're looking for this like how to. And I mean, we know best what's best for us.
Sat Nam. So Satnam means truth is my identity, and it's a yogic mantra, and it's just true. You know, when you really tap into the truth of your own identity, you start really peeling back the layers of your own destiny, your own dharma. And I think that is something that, you know, is pivotal to what I teach, is that each of us have a different destiny path. Each of us has, you know, a unique kind of source code and a unique just way that we're supposed to live and share our gifts and do all of those things. And so, you know, obviously there's teachings that I share that I think can help optimize your life, but not if you're not attracted to them. Not if you're like, oh, Vanessa said I have to do this, but I actually hate getting up early and doing yoga, but this is how I'm supposed to find enlightenment. It's like, that's like the antithesis of any of this, you know? And I always say this with, you know, students or anyone who will listen to me, I guess. It's like, if you approach everything with a curiosity and you allow the curiosity to draw you deeper into your practices because you're finding that you're more and more interested in them, then you know you're onto something. Then you know there's a little light that you're supposed to follow. But if you're just doing it because you feel like, you know, the Instagram influencer of the week is telling me I need to do this, and if I don't, I'm doing it wrong, then like, you know, you've already lost the game out the gate.
Curiosity, that word, it keeps coming up. I love with the breadth of people I speak to on the show, and we come from all walks of lives, you know, from like the scientist to the spiritualist, like from like the theologist to the thought leader, like we're all over the place, and it's really, really cool. But that is one theme that continuously comes up. Follow that curiosity. And I think we have lost so much of that curious nature in culture now. It's like we all think, like you said, oh, this is what you do. This is what a spiritual person looks like. This is what a spiritual person does. Or this is what an enlightened person does. Or this is what a wellness person does. I even had a conversation the other day that with Marianne DeMarco, and she's a medium, and she was just kind of like, no, you taking care of your kids and like making sure they're fed is a spiritual act. Like we need to stop putting labels on what it looks like to be certain things. And I think one of the best ways to do that is exactly what you said. Follow that curiosity. Our spirit is curious. It's going to lead us down that path to what is supposed to be our journey.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, I was just doing a reading for a woman yesterday, and she was like, I've completely lost my spirituality. You know, I'm not journaling. I'm not drawing cards. I'm not this. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with your spirituality. Like how many times a week you look at your oracle cards is not like a ranking system for how spiritual you are. And it was like, oh my gosh, you're doing so many things in the spirit of what your soul is calling you towards. Like that is spirituality. The way that you show up and the way that you breathe into the moment and the way that you connect with people, that's true spirituality, you know, in the way that I see it anyway.
I love that, because as fun as it is to pull the cards, we can actually get lost. Like we can use those things as crutches and think that we're being spiritual, or even like the journaling. Like I'm a writer, I'm a journaler. I talk about journaling all the time. I can't tell you honestly, full confession, the last time I actually picked up a pen and journaled. I'm freaking busy. I have 2 toddlers, a business, a husband. Like there's a lot going on. Sometimes at the end of the day, it's like, you know what you need to do for your soul to feel good. But it's just like, God, the only thing I can do that's spiritual right now is take a bath.
I mean, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is Netflix and chill. Let's be honest.
I love that. Oh my goodness. I love that. But we give it such a bad rap. We call it spiritual bypassing, or we say we're disconnecting. But sometimes that's what we need. Rest is just as important.
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny because I'm from Northern California, and in Northern California, there was this kind of thing growing up where it was like, we don't even have a TV. We don't even watch TV. There was like this, like, you know, you had more clout if like you never had a TV in your life. Right. So then I moved to Los Angeles for over 10 years, and I was living in Venice Beach, and everyone in LA is in love with film, in love with movies. Yeah. And all of a sudden I got this perspective, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a beautiful creative medium that people are, kind of projecting that it has to be this negative thing. And I'm like, no, yeah, obviously, if you're sitting there and you're watching the murder show and you're letting that come into your aura and kind of saturate, the DNA of your spirit, that's a problem. But if you can protect yourself energetically, you can set, you have a nice, big, supple, beautiful aura that keeps the energy out, then it becomes entertainment. And sometimes our spirit wants to be entertained. We want to watch stories and see film. And all of that is beautiful as long as you're in a location to receive it in the right way.
Well, and I think that's what it is our spirit craves creativity. It craves the fun. I mean, our kids are the most spiritual things in the world. They're the most connected. And what are they doing? They're playing make-believe. They're having fun. And I think we can make our spiritual practices so serious that we lose the essence of it, like you're saying. But I'm curious of how do you create that aura and those boundaries around yourself? Because I lived in LA for a very long time. I grew up in San Diego. I grew up in Southern California and then lived in LA for most of my life up until about 3 years ago. And, you're driving a lot and you get tired of certain things. So I was driving from San Diego to LA to be on set for, what I was doing. And it was literally, I got to the point where I was either streaming news 24/7 or I was streaming, crime the crime podcast because they're entertaining. But then it puts you into that mental state and you can't. So there has to be a balance. And how do we create that balance so that we don't get so sucked into that void and we can just look at it as entertainment and then know when to turn it down?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question. And honestly, this is one of the reasons I love Kundalini yoga and I love the Kundalini practices, because a huge emphasis is on building a big protective aura. And so we do that through in the Kundalini kind of tradition, you have sort of 5 aspects of it. So you have the mantra, and working with mantra all alone by itself is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do to protect your energy field. And so sometimes if you're sitting on the couch, you can actually be running a mantra and you can have a mala and you can actually be kind of protecting yourself through the sound current, which is a really powerful thing to do. And then the rest of the yogic teachings, encompass the physical aspect, that we think of yoga as, the breath work, the pranayama, the meditation, and then the mudra, the sacred hand positions. So when you put all of these together, they actually create a very, very protective energy field. And so for me, I do Kundalini yoga every single morning. That's my way of kind of setting my protective energy field. I have mantra running through my house 24/7. I have these little speakers that I call mantra boxes, and they're running, different protective and amplifying mantras through the house, the entirety of the day. And so there's just these little kind of energy hacks that you can do to kind of set the baseline as very protected and very, and just like in a positive current, you could say.
I love that. I love creating these little energy hacks because we are human and we do have to have this human experience. And being human now means very busy, and it means being very connected, and it means we're pulling in a lot of people's energy. So if we can find ways to hack it so that we can just instantly just be kept in our place, I think that's huge, because a lot of the times we will take on the vibes of others, and it's not serving us. It doesn't serve anyone in our family. And then, especially when you're in a family, your husband takes it on or your kids take it on, it just expands. And I think that's where we get into this angry mob mentality. And we need to come back to the collective consciousness of raising it all, which is happening. I mean, there is a conscious awakening right now, a collective awakening. And I think, finding these hacks to stay in that higher vibration zone is key.
Yeah. And I think the mantra is just a no brainer, because if you're running mantra 24/7 through your house, that frequency is just being broadcast through the field. And particularly when you're sleeping at night. So we have mantras in our room, and they're just, they're holding the consciousness, they're holding the conscious field, because when you're sleeping, you actually have a lot of sensitivity to the subconscious pressure. So the things that you're not aware of can kind of flood into the system system more when you're sleeping because you're a little bit more sensitive and open. So a huge hack is just running the mantra through your room in, at night while you're sleeping and help all of that subconscious energy. And I have kind of a fun story about mantras because we live now in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And last year we had a mama and a baby moose, and they came to the house, and they were at the house for days on end. The two of them were here. They were on the lawn, and they were just near our house. And we were saying, I think it's the mantra boxes. Like they feel really safe, and like the energy field of the house is just really, it has a nice energy. So then fast forward this year, it's the baby's first year without the mama, and it came back to the house. And it was here for like a couple of days, just hanging out by the house. And I was like, I really think it's the mantra. I think that, they just feel safe and they feel comfortable being in really close proximity. I mean, they're on our porch, like hanging out,
cool.
and we're opening the doors and we're like, hey, and they're just like so chill. And I think that speaks to the kind of force field, the energy that they're feeling in the home.
So are these mantras that you've recorded, or are they ones that you've like downloaded, or are they out there for share?
Yeah. So actually one of the most powerful things you can do is record your own voice. And we work with a mantra called Waheguru. It's a very simple mantra, Waheguru, Waheguru, Waheguru. And it really is an exaltation like of the divine, the great teacher. It's like, it's kind of like if you were to move, guru means moving from darkness to light. So it's kind of an exaltation of moving from the darkness into the light. And they say that if you actually record your own voice, repeating it, Waheguru, 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 and you sleep with that's actually one of the most powerful things you can do is your voice running the mantra. But you can also just download them and put tracks on the little speakers and play those as well. So, you can kind of like get in as deep as you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious if it's like almost like a form of like hypnosis or subconscious reprogramming, because there are like those sleep meditations that when you go to sleep you play. And I know my husband and I tried it once. His friend is a pretty well-known hypnotist, and he has like an abundance one. And then I think it shut off in the middle. We didn't do it long enough to really make a difference, but I'm always curious, like, does that work? And I know we are so much more connected when we go to sleep to that subconscious. We astral travel. We can have those experiences that we don't have in our waking moments. So I can only imagine how powerful that is. But I love that you're saying you put it in your own voice. Why is it so much more powerful when it's in your own voice, do you think?
Well, they say that your sound current is the most healing sound current for you. So it's the most hypnotic sound current for you. So when you hear the sound of your own voice, it's actually something that can kind of entrain you more than anything else. And it's because it's your unique codes, right? So rather than somebody else's codes coming in and you trying to kind of make those work, when you have your own codes, your own frequencies, it's almost like you just have a natural proclivity to open to that sound energy. So the funny thing is when you hear people say things like, oh, I hate the sound of my voice, or I can't stand listening to myself, that just means like there's a disharmony between you and your projection. So anytime you hear someone say that, like you actually want to encourage them to work on falling in love with their sound current, because what there is a disconnect between you and kind of the projection you're giving. So I always encourage students when they say, oh, I hate the sound of my voice, to actually work with this for a while until they get to the point where they fall in love with their voice. And then they know that they've kind of aligned their projection and who they are.
That is so fascinating. And I can't even like begin to tell you how accurate that is. And like the hugest breakthrough I just had, because I absolutely used to hate the sound of my voice. And working in TV for a long time, working in post-production, producing things, I would have to do this. I would have to record before we got our talent to do the recording. We would edit something ahead of time, and then you would go to the celebrity, whoever was saying it, and then they would speak the words and we would go back and edit it. But we're not going to have them do it 15 times to get it to time. So we would do it ourselves. Anytime I would record it, I could not stand my voice. I just hated it. I would cringe. It was one of those things. I hated it until I started this company and this business and started the podcast. And all of a sudden I found my voice and I feel
Yeah.
more aligned in everything I'm doing. I don't hate the sound of my voice anymore. It is, and I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, why don't I hate the sound of my voice anymore? There's always those moments and those things you're kind of like, that was a little cringy, but,
Yeah.
but I don't hate it. And so is that more that I just found my true voice and I'm more in alignment with myself?
Yeah. Yeah. It's literally that now you like what you're projecting, you like what you're running through yourself. And so there's a sense of like, oh, I like this, right? So it really is kind of a clue to people if they don't like the sound of their voice to look at, well, what is the disconnect between who I really am and what I'm projecting? And then just work on that. And I work with sound a ton because I think sound is, it really is kind of this final frontier of esoteric teachings and medicine or however you want to frame it. But, it's directly connected to what's going on in the chakra system. And so if your chakra system is not tuned, it's not appropriately, firing and balanced, then the sound that's coming out of you, even when you're not making any sound through your mouth, there's a sound coming out of you. If you aren't, if you're not running the frequencies that you want to be running and you're not optimizing your chakra system, it's going to show up in your sound. So it's just a really good way to kind of self-diagnose. Okay, I don't like the way I'm sounding right now. What's going on? Let me drop into my chakras. And there's lots of beautiful specific teachings around this, but just for the sake of today, it's just like drop in and see what's off in the chakra system and then kind of see if you can calibrate that. And then listen to yourself and see how it feels and how it sounds.
Wow. I mean, I've always known the power of sound because, if you're journaling or if you want to step into that space, I know Baroque music is great or just, the sound baths and things like that. There's certain thing, and I forget, there's a certain frequency, you probably know it, that you like is like the frequency of like creation and manifestation. And like, there's a certain frequency you want to be at, like a sound frequency, right?
Yeah. So there's lots of different, and they all have like little, slightly different things, but we were just actually working with 432 hertz in an Akashic ceremony that I hosted the other night. And so they say that 432 actually is one of your most natural frequencies of abundance, of manifestation, of kind of alignment. So if you're feeling like you're a little bit out of alignment, particularly if you're working in manifestation, you want to be working a lot with 432. We listen and are, there's a lot of 440 hertz coming at us. That's actually what a lot of the traditional kind of pop music and, the normal sort of music industry is, a lot of 440 hertz. And they say that, potentially that could pull you out of your natural kind of frequency. So it's interesting to think about the types of sound that's being broadcast at us and how we can sort of maybe get pulled out of our natural sound frequency, and that we have to kind of think about these things. There's a lot going on with sound that we're not even aware of. And, some people believe that maybe even some of that is, slightly, I don't know, well, whatever. Like, I don't want to get into like it being forces that are against us or whatever, but I was
going to say people are working against us, right?
I mean, there's people who believe that and who hold that. I don't like to go too far into that. Instead, I'm like, no, I'm responsible for my sound. I understand what I'm running. If I feel like I'm out of sorts, then I know how to get myself back in. So I'm very much more about owning my own energy field and my own sound current rather than worrying about what's going on out there. And I think there's just a lot of sovereignty and, personal empowerment in that stance. But it's worth noting that there are people who think that there are sound currents being broadcast at us to kind of, destabilize us to a certain degree. So these are just, they're things to consider. And so your sound is a big deal. These are pretty important teachings, I think.
Well, I think you're right on with that. I do think I don't know if it's to destabilize us, but I think whether it's sound, whether it's advertising, whether it's what we're consuming in any part of our life, I do think it's a power grab. I think there's ego based, it's more of like a power thing, but we do have the power to change that for ourselves. We have complete control. And I think any layman will agree that sound can move you to change everything about your life. You hear a song that it can take you back to a time of your childhood. It can raise your mood. My husband came in here right before we started talking with the kids and started playing like a Beyonce song that I love. And it put me in such a good mood, and I was dancing, and you could put you in that power. But I'm curious what you're saying about the different sound frequencies of pop being in like kind of that destabilizing zone, because it's really powerful. But I'm curious, do you know anything about some of those people that are out there, like Russ, who sings about, do you know his music at all? Like how he talks about manifestation stuff? I'm curious if those
Say it one more time.
frequencies.
You just skipped a little bit. Say his name again.
Oh, Russ, how he sings about manifestation and things like that. You don't know him?
I don't know Russ.
I'm going to have to look and see kind of like where his frequency of music is in, because it's definitely in like this calming, like chill space. And I know he's manifested a lot in his life. And so like when you can get into that zone, I'm really curious how that can create that environment and that vibration around you, because that's what we're doing. That's what we want to create.
Yeah. And there's actually a lot of musicians who are starting to work with this. They're starting to understand the different, frequencies and intentionally bringing in the more positive, the more powerful frequencies. So it's changing. Like you said before, there is a collective awakening, and people are coming online and they're making new music, and they're actually pointing, things in the direction of really trying to up level the field. And so I think that's where we keep looking and noticing and emphasizing and magnifying and all of that with our own attention, because where the attention goes, the energy flows, right? So rather than being all stressed out about whatever people might be trying to do negatively to us, how can we turn our attention towards the people who are doing the positive things and making an impact in our own energy, and how we amplify that? And that makes a huge difference. We're part of this morphic resonance. We're part of this, group aura, you could say. So the more of us that start pulling up the, the saturation, so to speak, on this whole thing, the more that this thing comes into living color, and we start to actually live into this new world that we're creating.
I love that. I had a mentor who wanted to do a concert, and she was talking with, Andra Day's people about the song Rise Up. And she wanted to like program it, like with Reiki, to heal the audience and to actually bring up that consciousness. She never actually did it, but like, if you hear that song, it definitely has the swell. You can feel it in your heart. You feel it in that space, and it really can help you rise. And I'm curious about if you can like use Reiki and things like that, modalities like that, to help program it so that, for people who are maybe less aware, it can help them rise up, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. 1,000%. And I write music as well. That's why I was in LA for a long time. And, I opened the Akashic Records, and I actually channel in music now and songs. And that's a lot of my work now, is actually bringing those through from that, incredible universal field of knowledge. And so, absolutely. You can. And I think this is what's happening, even with a lot of musicians who don't realize they're doing it. They're imbuing it with a more positive frequency. I mean, who's the musician, Little John, that just released a meditation album? I mean, things.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that. Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I love that you brought him up. I do this horrible impression of him, but I love him so much. So funny. And it's like, it's obnoxious, but that is so, I don't imagine him. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to ruin anyone's day by my horrible impression.
In my mind. It's kind of true.
I'll beam it to you guys all. But like, it just seems so off of who he is to do a meditation. That's so crazy. So what is the Akashic Records saying? Like, what are the Akashic Records bringing in right now?
I think, the Akashic Records are really just this compendium of universal knowledge, right? So it's really just everything is there. So it's not necessarily about what it's bringing in, but it's more about kind of like what you're tapping into with it and what you're using it for, And so ultimately you could tap into it and find whatever it is you're looking for. I kind of use it. I mean, I use it for everything. I use it for business ideas and ideation. I use it for songwriting. songwriting. I use it for my own just meditative processes and kind of soul alignment. So it's like, it's really whatever you want to create with it is there. But I think when it comes to like songwriting, it like quite literally just channels in the chords, the lyrics, you know, I can just kind of, it's almost like a co-writer, so to speak. Like I'm sitting there, you know, in a writing session with the Akashic Records. So yeah.
I love that. So what is the difference now? Because I know a little bit about the Akashic Records. I know more about like channeling, you know, our spirit guides or, you know, your higher self and source. What is the difference between channeling from the Akashic Records? Because to me, in my layman's knowledge of the Akashic Records, it's like the super drive. It's like the super hard drive of the universe that just like holds everything in it.
Exactly.
That's okay, good. So I'm on there. So how, like, what does it mean to channel from there versus like channeling from a guides or the angels or your higher self?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's very similar. And I think the subtle difference, for me at least, with my experience in the Akashic Records, is that there's a certain frequency that comes online when I work in the Akashic Records. And when I'm working in the Akashic Records, I will still work with guides or with master teachers or ancestors or, you know, any of the kind of things that we think about when we're working with our higher self or our spirit guides or all the things you said. That still happens, but there's something about the container of the Akashic field that to me has a sort of amplifying effect. And it just seems, and I really wish that there was like studies done on what brainwave state you drop into, but I'm pretty sure that you drop into a theta brainwave state just from my experience of working with theta waves and how I feel in the Akashic Records. And the theta wave is it's the wave that you're in that kind of dream state. So it's a very open state. It's super powerful for manifestation, creativity, you know, all of that stuff. So it seems to me when you access the Akashic Records, you're tapping into just kind of a slightly different brainwave state. And it seems to like I said, have an amplifying effect on whatever it is that you're working with, whatever you're calling in. It just kind of turns up the volume on it. And it doesn't happen necessarily right away. Like you do need to kind of learn the language of the Akashic Records and get in and, you know, establish your relationship, so to speak. But for some people, it comes on instantly and it's like, oh, we've been waiting for you. Where have you been? Here, like, go.
Wow.
So it's, you know, I think it's like any of these things, you might just find that the Akashic field for you holds a certain level of vibrational force that seems to activate you in a different way, seems to kind of, you know, like I said, turn up the volume on whatever it is that you're working on. And that is certainly my experience. And obviously students I've worked with, you know, we feel like, oh, there's just something different about being in this particular subtle energy, etheric realm with intention and focus that turns up the volume on what we're working on.
So can anyone access it? Because part of me has always felt like it was like this special elite club. Like you have to have your little key to be able to like go into the Hall of Records. And I don't actually think that's, you know, really the case. I feel like any of us can, but there is something that you have to learn to enter it, right? Or is it an exclusive club that only some people can access?
You know, I was just literally writing about this morning, so it's like perfect timing. But so everyone can access it, of course, because they're your Akashic Records. So I mean, it's like saying, oh, well, you can't have access to your records. Of course, you can have access to your records, like, you know. But at the same time, you know, you might need someone to guide you and show you how to do it and like walk you back to the files and be like, oh, hey, that one's yours. Like, you know, you might need some guidance. You might need some support. You might not. You might just sit down, make the intention of going into the Akashic Records and feel like it completely happens and you're connected and you're good to go. The experience that I've had and a lot of, you know, people that I've worked with have said that they felt connected and they felt like, okay, there's something here, but actually getting some training and having someone support them, strengthen that connection and help them feel like, oh no, I'm really locked in. Like I'm here now. And so I think it's just a continuum for us, right? Some people are just going to get in there and feel, oh, I got this. This is here. I've got, I'm online with it. And some of us are going to feel like, okay, I might need a little bit of support or guidance with how to navigate this experience.
How did you find your way in? Because the last person I spoke to who teaches about reading into the Akashic Records had a near-death experience that really just like brought her into it. And then I know other people who have, like you said, learned and gone through trainings to get more comfortable with it. Yet I find that those people sometimes still don't trust themselves. And I know from all of this work in general is we can do these readings for ourselves. We are our best channel for ourselves, yet building that trust is really hard with ourselves to really believe what we're channeling. So how did you find your way into it?
Yeah. And I'll just start by saying this is actually why I love teaching people to read their Akashic records, because I totally agree. You can read your records and you absolutely have access to your own field. I came to it kind of accidentally because I had taken a year-long internship with these women that taught in the Berkeley Psychic Institute method. So, if you're not familiar, the Berkeley Psychic Institute is kind of this incredible, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the word. It's like, it's this, I don't know, this school, like it's kind of like a Hogwarts, you could say, right? It's been around for a really long time. They have a certain methodology and training style that helps you to bring on your psychic capabilities and your sort of your different clairs, your clairvoyance or your claircognizance, or the different ways that you intuitively download information. And so when I was working with these women, that was the first time that I went into the Akashic field, and they actually took me into a specific arena of the Akashic records known as the pools. And this is where you can connect with souls from the other side. So this was, 15 years ago or whatever, I took this training. That was my first access point. I kind of I had it, but didn't work with it a lot for several years. And then in 2020, it just all came back online, and it was like, okay, time to start working in the records again, time to start teaching it. Here's your own prayer. They gave me my own prayer, which basically is saying like, now you're a teacher and now, you need to carry on the tradition of teaching people how to do this. So like, it just, it came on kind of slowly, and then with a fervor of like, all right, now get to work.
Wow. So what is the difference? I'm just curious now. You said like they took you into the pools where you could connect with other souls who have passed on. So what's the difference between that and practicing mediumship?
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't much of a difference. In fact, some of my students who've come through the training end up being, having the mediumship come on and the channeling come on, and they really, really connect in with being able to channel either verbally or through scripting, actually writing out whatever's coming through. So there really isn't any difference. It's a way to access it, and it happens for a lot of people. And in fact, one thing I realize is like channeling and mediumship is really not that big of a deal. Like this veil that separates us is actually quite thin. If we just kind of learn how to maneuver with it, it's really not that hard to get in touch with these souls, as long as they want to be in contact, as long as they're available for that. And I think that this is the other thing that I love about people learning to do this for themselves, is it kind of, lifts the veil on it. It's like, you don't have to be special. You're not the chosen one. Sure, there are certain people who come in with a higher level of attainment, and maybe they've done this in past lives. So like, there's just more there for them. But every single one of us has this opportunity to develop this skill and to develop this way of interfacing with reality.
I think that's huge. I think that we put this idea that like channeling or connecting with the other side is like this huge skill or this thing you're either born with or you don't have, or we build it up to be something. And even when I started learning, the different healing modalities and how to connect and going through all the different trainings I've gone through, it was exactly like what you said. I wanted to be the chosen one. I wanted to be like, oh, I'm special. Only I can do this. And now, years later, a decade later, I'm like, okay, no, that was ego speaking. That was not the reality of it. And then I question sometimes about channeling, but I had this conversation with another medium the other day. And I said, I don't plan a lot of these things, these conversations we're having. We don't, I don't script things out. It just happens in the moment. She goes, yes, because you're a channel. And I don't think we realize that we're like when it is so innate in us, when it is so ingrained in us, I don't even think we know the difference of like when we're like consciously choosing to do it and we're doing it. We're just channeling. And that's why these conversations can happen the way they do, is we're just channeling this information. I'm not speaking in a tongue. I'm not speaking a light language. I know that's available to us, but I'm not, and I have had teachers who speak differently when they channel, but that's more of a meditative channel. It's a little bit more of a download, but we are channeling probably every day. Most of us probably are channeling every day.
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely, if we're connected to source, we're connected to spirit, we're allowing that to move through us. And I think that there's varying degrees of mediumship. There's a type of medium that gets completely out of the way and allows their vessel to be taken over by the entity or the energy or the whatever to come in and inhabit and speak through them. And then there's every degree, before that, right? So it's like you could let that energy in a little bit. You could keep that energy out there and only allow it to come in and now speak through you. You could allow it just to come through the crown chakra and script it. There's all different kinds of ways that you can set it up. And so I think you're right. We only think that it's mediumship or it's channeling if somebody, gets taken over and the eyes roll back. And it's like, oh, okay, you're legit. And it's like, well, no, they just are cool. They're comfortable with moving out of the way and letting the thing come through in a more palpable way than maybe some of us are.
Yeah. Well, and I will say the people that I know that have been, into mediumship and who practice mediumship, their skills have only been strengthened once they got into the Akashic Records. I feel like you're saying, I understand what you're saying, where it like turns up the volume. Now, I've never been able to, or I've never tried to tap into the Akashic Records, but I know definitely the people that I have seen in my circle that have really tapped in, it really is just heightened their sense. And these were great mediums, great readers that still didn't trust themselves half the time, but tapping into the Akashic Records, like, wow, it is just like you're adding a steroid to your capabilities.
Yeah. And I think that's what I'm always trying to explain to people, is that just learning how to read and interface with the records is just like part of it. The other part of it is just this massive, massive upgrade energetically that you get when you're working with that kind of field. You naturally get a healing sort of sensation when you're working in the Akashic Records. You naturally feel a little bit more euphoric and happy. You kind of feel like maybe you had a really deep meditation that you didn't have to spend 2 hours or 3 hours doing. Like there's just seems to be this energetic upgrade that happens kind of on a 360 degree, facet for you that most people, if they really just spend the time and dedicate themselves to connect in, inevitably feel.
Wow. So how do we learn with you? How do we learn to tap into the Akashic Records?
Yeah, I have a course. So it's an Akashic certification course, and it's self-guided. So you can really, some women come in and take 3 months to do it. Some women come in and take 6 months to do it. But it's really about, your own kind of journey and self-pace. And the cool thing about this is it's the exact certification that I taught live for years. And now it's self-study. And when I first changed it to self-study, I was really nervous because I was like, oh, is the live component, is it essential to the teachings? What I ended up finding was that actually the women who were going through the self-study were dropping in even deeper, even quicker, because they weren't in a room of women they were comparing themselves to, and they were worried that like, oh, am I not getting as much as she's getting, or I'm not, hearing it like she is, or they completely didn't have any of that sort of comparison. And so the women that are going through it now, I'm like, holy cow, like they're having the most incredible experiences of it. And what's cool is it has the live broadcast of me teaching it live, but then they get to be in their own kind of container to go as deep as they can possibly go. And so yeah, it's a great way to learn to do it, because you kind of have the best of both worlds. You have this live like energy, and then you have this permission to just like go in without any distraction, any comparison. And like I said, the women that are going through it are blowing my mind. I'm like, holy cow, like they're coming out, women that had no intention of doing it professionally, just wanted to learn how to do it. You know, they're coming out and getting offered jobs as healers, and like they're having like massive upgrades in their businesses. It's just like, it's very, very potent. So anyway, you can learn through the Akashic certification, and yeah, it's like available whenever you're ready for it.
So wait, I'm just curious because you keep bringing up this idea of comparison, and you know, these two words, the comparison and the curiosity. Is comparison keeping us from realizing our true potential?
You know, I guess you could look at it that way, but honestly, I think what happens with comparison sometimes is we're actually seeing what our potential could be, and we're impatient to get there.
Oh.
You know, it's like, oh man, I see her over there and she's holding this certain level and I want to be there, you know, like I'm ready to just like time shift and be there. And so I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. I think that we can be in a location to everything that is either positive or negative current. And so we could either say, oh, comparison is terrible and it's hurting us and we shouldn't do that because it's killing our vibe. Or we can say, oh, comparison is this awesome way for me to recognize there's a place that I want to get to in myself that hasn't quite showed up that I'm excited to get to. And so I'm very much like in every scenario, there's a positive and negative. There's a polarity. It's about you choosing which polarity you want to be in and then creating your reality from that stream.
I love that. It's all about our perception. We get to choose.
Yeah.
And we can choose. And I've said that before. It's like, you can say this phrase came up once before. It was like, oh, I can't believe this is my life. Or you can be like, I can't believe this is my life. It's the same exact words. It's all in our tone. It's all in our inflection. It's all in our perception. It's however we want to view it. So yes, comparison can be just a hint towards where you want to go. And I love that. It's the impatient factor because we want to know now. We want to get there now. I'm right there with everyone. I want to like time jump all, you know, and I know we can. I know there is such a thing as quantum leaping, but sometimes we also have to go through our journey to get there for whatever reason that we may not know.
Yeah, absolutely. You get a vote and the thing that you're trying to create gets a vote and God gets a vote. Like there's 3 votes, right? And so sometimes you're outvoted and you have to go through the steps and you have to actually do all of the things. Sometimes the energy is held where it's like, actually, no, you can skip steps and you can collapse timelines and you can go to that level of attainment more quickly. And I think that this is, you know, innately, we're just developing the sensitivity to ourselves to know whether or not it's time to leap or it's time to actually take the steps and shore up the process as we go. And the cool thing about all of this is that it's just your own journey. Like there's no hard and fast rules. There's just a sensitivity to what is, and then taking the next best action for what you really feel is correct for you.
I love that. Well, we can somewhat quantum leap and time jump by joining different events and groups. So how do we, I know you have something coming up this summer. How do we join you and your container so that we can raise our vibration quicker?
Yeah, so Starseed Collective is like the home for everything. And you can see Starseed University there. You can see the Starstream, which is my Kundalini yoga platform. And then my other company is Be the Wellness, BEE, the Wellness. And that's where we host all of our, you know, conscious travel and events all over the world. So we've got an event in Santa Fe for summer solstice. That'll be a Starseed Awakening event where we'll really be tapping into our Starseed lineage, and we'll be working with kind of the elemental forces of fire and water and really be doing some incredible stuff. But we have trips all over the world. We'll be taking a group to Egypt and Nepal later this year. You know, next year it looks like we'll probably be doing Bali and Greece, and you know, we're all over the place. So really, it's whenever you listen to this, whatever timeline that you collapsed and got to get here, you can always just check out Starseed Collective or Be the Wellness, and that's the central hub for all the things.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. I so loved our conversation today and love all of your doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I appreciate you so much and love your sound current.
Thank you. And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Vanessa Lambert, for the great conversation, the deep dive into the Akashic Records, sound frequencies, and using mantras to change your life. If you want to work with Vanessa or go on any of her events, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, our courses, and everything else we have coming up soon. I'll talk to you later. Bye.